What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Awesemo.com's NFL on the Contrary show. I'm Dave Loughran. With me, as always, number one ranked DFS player in the world, Alex Baker. Alex, week 3, man. It is finally upon us. A ton of injuries, 13 games to talk about. How you feeling?
Good, man. It feels like week 2 because I'm ready to forget about what actually happened in week 2. So just happy to have another chance at winning one of these big prizes in a new week.
And I'm very excited to announce our guest for week 3 here. It's been long overdue. Really happy to have this reunion. Who knew it would be in 2020? I'd be with Awesemo and him, Davis Mattek, who I worked with for many years in the Fantasy Insider days, back at the inception of the DFS world. He's now over there at Sports Grid. He's the host of the Takecast and, of course, the long-running Swolecast. Man, I'm glad to be back with you. What's going on, brother?
You know, I'm very happy to be here chatting with you, Laffy. It's been too long, and you know, it's like riding a bike. You know, there's just we'll be able to fall right back into our old routines. You know, we can vibe with that.
That's yeah, we sure can. I actually I told Justine today, my wife, I was like, yeah, I'm going on with Davis Mattek. She's like, oh well, the one from San Diego, right? So even you left an impression upon her. It's good stuff.
Well, there you go. I mean, oftentimes people, I find that I do leave an impression on them because I just annoy the shit out of them for just, hours on end. And it's very hard to forget that.
Happy to have everyone with us as always. Hammer that thumbs up button if you're just jumping in, subscribe and hit the notification bell if you haven't done so yet. We got content for all sports every day of the week, all hours of every day. So you always know when new content's dropping next. Of course, we got Jordan Klein producing today. He's going to be working the controls. Alex, let me start with you. Before we get into these games, and if you're new to On the Contrary, we're not taking your generic cash game approach here. We're coming in with some hot takes based in reason, which is why Davis Mattek is perfect for this show. And, of course, you too, Alex. Before we jump into the games, I want to ask you something, being that it's an On the Contrary show. It's a contrarian show. What is it that makes a good contrarian team or game stack for every week of NFL? Because I think a lot of people look at teams, look at games, they say, oh, that's low owned. And that's their immediate assumption is just because something isn't heavily owned, because it's ignored, that it immediately makes it a good play.
Yeah, I mean, when we think of good football games, it's usually like a lot of passing. Like you got 2 really good teams that are putting up points and then the game's flowing. And that's what makes a good game stack, right? So when you got a game like Dallas-Seattle this week, 2 good quarterbacks, or even Arizona-Detroit, there's like a pretty good chance that'll happen. There's also a very good chance that one of the teams will just be up and then they'll grind the clock down to a halt, and you won't get that fourth quarter production to put you over the edge into the winning spot. But then, like, if you go down to like games that aren't as likely for that to happen, ones with lower totals, like a good example this week could be the Giants in San Francisco, where both teams are just like completely ravaged by injuries. Like the chance of that game like blowing up like Dallas-Seattle isn't as high, but when it does, you're going to be competing with less people for the win. So most of the time with a good contrarian stack, there's only one thing in the way of success. Like either you have a really good passing team that is a big favorite and you need the other team to produce. A good example would be Indianapolis versus the Jets, where if the Jets somehow come out and put up a lot of points, then Rivers is in an amazing spot. Or you get a bad team where they're big underdogs and they're just going to pass a ton, and you're hoping they can get it done, like Haskins versus the Browns. But they're not very good at passing, so it's not as likely. So it's like you gotta like figure out one team that maybe there's only one barrier to their success and go with them, and they're going to be a little bit under the radar. But Davis, how do you approach the stacking as far as contrarian, chalk stacks, game stacks? What do you do?
So I think the easiest ways to find contrarian game stacks are find the games that are going to be relatively popular. So, we have Detroit, Arizona, we have Dallas and Seattle these weeks, and then find the roster constructions that people won't be using from those games. So for example, everyone and their mother is going to stack Russell Wilson with one of Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, but they're be much less likely to bring that back with someone like Dalton Schultz or Ezekiel Elliott, whereas the popular bringbacks, would be Gallup, Cooper, and CeeDee Lamb. I think that's kind of that's like the contrarian 101 way to approach it. And then I think the other thing you said is exactly right on, is you try and find the popular games that could actually see a lot of passing attempts. So, some of the ways you could do that would be, obviously if a team like randomly is just suffering a bunch of defensive injuries, like it just kind of piles up one week where they have like 4 defensive starters out, or just games where when teams get behind, they're much more likely to pass, and that's kind of different from their normal rate. So like an example of a game where I don't like that theory at all is going to be Tennessee and Minnesota, because even when those teams get behind by a ton, I just don't think that we're going to see loads of them, loads of pass attempts. I think an example where teams would be willing to break that structure is going to be the Rams and the Bills, where both of those teams, when they're trailing or even in situation neutral scripts, they're much more likely to go pass heavy.
Yeah, the Bills have played with leads in back-to-back games, and Josh Allen threw for his first and second 300-yard games of his career, one of them eclipsing 400 yards. Davis, let me stick with you for a second. Kind of in the same vein here, you're looking to make good decisions that are different from the field, but not stupid. And as I was making groups today on Fantasy Cruncher for week 3, I was considering, what, if any, running backs am I willing to roster with my quarterback? Last week, with Brian Hooper, we talked about, do you ever want to run running backs, run them back against your team or in your stack with as the only player from the opposite team? But what about running backs? For example, somebody like Austin Eckler a lot last year would have been in Phillip Rivers stacks. People would have included him. Miles Sanders seems to be getting a lot of looks. Barkley and McCaffrey, when they're active, are 2 other examples. But is it worth it to include them in your groupings for these teams when you're making team and game stacks?
Yeah, I definitely think so, because those are going to be the far lower owned options, right? Like Kenyon Drake with Kyler Murray is just going to be so much. Like I would actually bet that not only will Kenyon Drake with Kyler Murray be lower owned than DeAndre Hopkins, I would actually think more people would roster Christian Kirk with Kyler Murray than they would with Kenyon Drake. I think the same is true with Dak and Zeke and those pass catchers. I think the same thing would be. It's okay.
All right, Alex. So let's close this conversation with this, and then we'll get into the games. Davis mentioned being able to take a popular game and maybe get some less popular pieces of that game. What is your process for selecting pass catchers that make it or don't make it into these groups and into these stacks for each week?
Yeah, the tough thing is in fantasy football, like most teams don't have a ton of guys you can realistically roster without just like tanking your chances of cashing. And example could be the Vikings, where Adam Thielen's really the only guy that puts up any sort of meaningful like production every week. So like on those teams, it's like you could stack up Justin Jefferson and BC Johnson instead of Thielen, but like, man, you're really shooting yourself in the foot there. If I'm having Kirk Cousins, I probably want Thielen. If you go to a team like Dallas, there's just so many more targets that put up production. I mean, you got Gallup and Lamb and Cooper, and then Ezekiel Elliott is putting up a lot of receiving yardage. So your options for stacking are just a lot greater. So like the conclusion that I'm reaching this week is I see Kyler Murray is the highest owned quarterback, but really the only good pairing is with Hopkins. So I think like if you play Kyler Murray like in Hopkins, you're just going to overlap a ton with other people. So I might just fade that team just because I feel like it's too difficult to come up with a unique lineup using Kyler Murray.
Throughout the week, we have the NFL Strategy Show Monday through Saturday, and we break all of the games down. Thursday with myself and Matt Savoca is the full matchup breakdown, and then tomorrow the deeper dive leading up until lock 3-hour stream right here on the channel. We'll hit on every game as well, but we really want to spend some time getting into the strong pivots, contrarian plays, and not just plays, but decisions for this slate and the way to approach it. So Davis, I'll throw it over to you, man. We've got two players right now with our Awesemo ownership projections that are coming in above 30%, Miles Sanders and DeAndre Hopkins. Now, we all know with chalk, specifically for running back, one of the things that differentiates good chalk and bad chalk is flat, just opportunity, right? How much volume are they going to get? How much can we count on them? Can they catch passes out of the backfield and get 20 carries? Miles Sanders is that guy. And it's also very probable, or it's very possible that Doug Peterson looks to lessen the responsibility on Carson Wentz maybe going into week 3 after a dreadful start to the year. Miles Sanders, very popular. How do we approach that, knowing that the volume's almost certainly going to be there, barring an injury?
I have no thoughts in my head of like trying to get off of Miles Sanders. I think that at running back, instead of thinking about consciously fading guys, I think the right way to think of it is what are some of the guys who can approximate these scores, right? So instead of thinking, I'm not going to play Miles Sanders in my MME run or in single entry or 3 max, I would say, what is the likelihood that Derrick Henry is able to outscore, not only outscore Sanders overall, but like outscore him at the price to make it relative. So like, can Derrick Henry get 31 while Miles Sanders gets 24, and then kind of use that to guide your ownership at wide receiver? Because the scoring is so volatile, these guys are getting 12 opportunities a game instead of 25 opportunities a game. I think there's way more I think you have way more leeway to just be like, well, I'm just not going to play DeAndre Hopkins in my 150 run, or last week, I'm not going to play Devontae Adams in my 150 run. But because there's just a limited number of running backs in a given week who can actually even get 30 points, I think there's way less value in getting off someone like Miles Sanders.
Yeah, and Alex, right now, Hopkins hauling in 33% ownership. Tyler Lockett's at 26%, but there's an abundance of skilled wide receivers scattered throughout the player pool this week in great spots. We'll get to that Bills-Rams game that Davis mentioned. I think there's an incredible amount of opportunity there and other spots that are going overlooked. Does that give us some leeway when it comes to getting off of someone like Hopkins? Because people are all over this game. They see a 55.5 point total, 30+ point implied total for Arizona, and game's over.
Yeah, I think Hopkins is a great play this week. I agree with everything Davis was saying about how with running backs, there just aren't as many guys that can get there. And that makes a guy like Miles Sanders more valuable than Hopkins in a certain way, because like we see like random receivers every week put up big scores. I think Danny Amendola had like 2 20-point games last year, and he averaged like 40 or 50 yards or something. So it's like you got 3 wide receivers per team. They all have upside because that position is so variant. And that makes it a little harder to replace a Miles Sanders than DeAndre Hopkins. But to answer your original question, like, what are we doing with Hopkins? I guess it's like you don't need to go contrarian with every pick in your lineup. So I'm just going to be playing a lot of these good players like Sanders and Hopkins, but then trying to also pair them with some under-the-radar options that we'll talk about later.
Davis, let's zoom in a little bit at the running back position, circle back to Miles Sanders here, because I think you made some good points as far as, Derrick Henry at that price. Can he outproduce Sanders? There's more, too, though, right? You've got and this isn't to say that all of these guys are in pristine spots, but just to name a few workhorse backs, some of whom are actually getting more involved in the passing game as well. Josh Jacobs wasn't at practice Thursday. I don't know if he practiced today or if we even know yet. He did
West Coast time zone, bro. We're just finding out right now.
Yeah, there you go. He's back. He's got a New England team that had a ton of opt-outs defensively and has looked like a shell of themselves against better players. Granted, Miami, and then you go against Wilson, who's, in my opinion, a top 3 quarterback. You're going to struggle, but they really struggled. So you've got Taylor against them. If that game stays close, you're locking in 20+ carries. Jonathan Taylor against the Jets, 11.5 point favorites. Nick Chubb, who in a positive game script is almost certain to get 18 to 22 carries, even if Kareem Hunt gets a lot of work. Eckler has huge touchdown favorites against Carolina. And I'll even throw in one more. James Conner against Houston, They're only laying 4 points, but James Conner came back after looking like he was going to be ruled out throughout the entirety of that week and that Benny Snell would have the backfield. He comes in and picks up 16 carries and pops it in the end zone. So to your point, there are a lot of guys in that 6K to low 7K range that could be very appealing at low ownership.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are a plethora of ways that you can get off of Miles Sanders on DraftKings and FanDuel this week. I think that Jonathan Taylor is super strong. I think Devin Singletary with Zach Moss out I actually think he's probably the play that ends up getting a little bit underrated this week because, people are so focused on the Josh Allen rushing, but from weeks 8 to 16 last year, no Bills starters played in week 17. Singletary handled 48% of the team's rushes, 13% of the team's targets. Now, granted, Steph Diggs was not on the team last year, but Josh Allen also seems like he's playing better this year than last year. And at his price tag on DraftKings specifically, my guess is that a lot of people do go with the Derrick Henry pivot with the James Conner pivot. Obviously, a lot of people are going to be playing Ezekiel Elliott as well. My guess is that Singletary ends up being like one of those 10 to 20% owned plays that's not like contrarian, but also isn't like super stone chalk that has like real slate winning upside.
For sure. With Zach Moss out, it's definitely going to open things up. If he comes in between 10 and 15%, I love it. And Alex, I don't think any of us are advocating for a Miles Sanders fade here at all. But more so just to point out that people get sucked into this tunnel vision where you see a specific player, you really like him. You see, oh, okay, it seems like everyone else really likes him as well. It makes it very easy to ignore some of these other players who could be in line for, here's the thing, they could be in line for equal or higher workloads given the way these games are set up. So that's the way I see it. Like Miles Sanders is an excellent play, but there are some guys that are easy 20 plus look type running backs, several of them with pass catching upside that fit that exact same mold with way lower ownership, way less attention on them going into week 3.
Yeah, I mean, we got some great options at running back. Singletary, I think you guys called it. He's a great play with Zach Moss out. I mean, the value there is crazy. So I think he'll be somewhat popular. We got guys like Kenyon Drake that maybe have been a little disappointing so far. So he's kind of seen his price fall to a point where he's a good play. David Johnson with Duke Johnson being kind of limited or out. He seems like a workhorse back going up against Pittsburgh. That's a tough matchup, but the price is right at 5,400. So I think there's just like so many different ways you can build your lineup this week. It'll be pretty fun to figure out which of these are the best plays.
David Montgomery, less than 1% ownership. I know you guys are getting tired of me saying this, but I'm steering that hype train right now. Tariq Cohen might have got the extension, but he's not been utilized much at all. Montgomery's ran only 3 fewer routes than him all in both games this season. And it looks like in last game where he went down with that injury in the second quarter, he was easily pacing 20 plus carries in this one. So no ownership on him at all in a game where most people are assuming it'll go strictly to the air. If it doesn't, and Chicago's defense holds up enough to keep this competitive, which I think they should, Montgomery might be in for another big workload. So let's pivot off to some of the most popular stacks this week, Davis. Sure, a lot of people are waiting for us to get to these. And the first one, we already touched on it briefly, is Arizona and the Detroit Lions. The game's interesting, though, because the Arizona Cardinals have Hopkins, Murray, and Drake all north of 25% ownership projected right now. Christian Kirk's around 10. On the other side, in a game that still has a monster total, Kenny Golladay is the only one really drawing any attention as our ownership stands right now.
Yeah, and I think that, TJ Hawkinson is a really interesting pivot. Actually, if we want to remember, TJ Hawkinson's very first NFL game, 7 catches, 132 yards, and a touchdown in that overtime game against the Cardinals last year. But like more long-term, something I think that's pretty important is to develop priors with players so that you're like, I would like to be buying this player, even if there's not anything specifically jumping out about this matchup, just because I would like to have leverage on the field on this player, because I think that some indeterminate point in the future, his price will be higher, his ownership will be higher. And this is a good matchup. Actually, probably the best matchup, right? Flow chart against the Arizona Cardinals for the tight end. Shout out to our boy Al Zeidenfeld. And I mean, you're going to get 6 to 10% ownership in tournament formats on Hawkinson. That really might even be high for Hawkinson. So I like him. I think that Marvin Jones, after basically disappointing for 2 weeks in a row, like again, we're talking 3% ownership on him or something like that. I think the most interesting wrinkle for Detroit, Arizona, though, seems like Christian Kirk is not going to play. He has not practiced at all this week, not at practice today. I'm basically ready to just jam it in on Andy Isabella.
There we go. Just jamming it in. Okay. That was, I believe you actually created that term. Like that, in the DFS space, not sure many people used jam him in until you started using it frequently, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. So it's good to hear it again. I got to tell you. Okay, Alex, if Christian Kirk doesn't play, that'll definitely open things up. It might even flood more ownership towards Hopkins and potentially Drake. How do you approach a game like this right now that has the bulk of ownership coming in on one side of the game?
Yeah, I mean, I think Arizona is just insanely popular this week, given the matchup. They have a total of 30.5. They're not really priced high enough at all on any of the sites. So that makes a lot of sense why they're so popular. Detroit, I mean, they're not nearly as popular. We have Stafford at 7.4% compared to Murray at 27%. So he's still one of the highest owned quarterbacks on Sunday's slate, 6th highest. So it's not like I'm going out of my way to get guys from this game. If I do get guys, I mean, I'll probably stick to Galladay, Jones, and Hawkinson. Maybe with Galladay coming off the injury and not having played this year, his ownership will be a little bit depressed, even though he stands out as a really good play. Hawkinson, he's just really expensive on DraftKings. On FanDuel at 5,400, he makes sense. On DraftKings, he's 5,300, which, given their salary cap, is a lot more. So I think there's other games I like a lot better, and this game being one of the 2 highest totals of the week is just not doing it for me.
Is there any interest at all in the run game for Detroit now that it's been very hard to decipher what's going to happen there outside of, Adrian Peterson likely still getting work if it's a favorable game script? DeAndre Swift is being used more so as a pass catcher than on the ground. And Curry Johnson has been relegated to 7 or so touches per game.
Yeah, I think this backfield is just too hard to peg. If we had some inside info, in chat, let us know if you have any sources in the Lions. But I think we already expected a Kerryon Johnson, DeAndre Swift timeshare, and just throwing Adrian Peterson in the mix he actually played the most week 1, I think, which was insane. So I think it's just a stay away spot for me.
So, by the way, AJ Brown was just ruled out for that Titans game. We're starting to get a lot more information. Juju Smith is expected to play. And Davis, you mentioned that it's a very good chance Christian Kirk doesn't play. George Kittle's out. It's looking ugly. But if we turn the page to Seattle and Dallas, Davis, Football Outsiders pace stats show Dallas is averaging 19.69 seconds per play, which is easily the fastest in the league by 4 full seconds. Seattle, on the other hand, dead last, 31.28 seconds per play. Now, I want to put this in context a little bit. Dallas has been playing from behind in consecutive games, so I do think that makes a pretty significant difference. But even in the first half, 20.24 seconds per play, they're playing it at a lightning fast pace to start the season.
They are playing at a lightning fast pace to play the season, and I expect that basically to continue because their defense is terrible and they have to get into hurry-up mode in the second half in every game. And then when they get in hurry-up mode and they stop running on first down, they complete a lot of passes and score a lot of points because they have the best grouping of wide receivers in the NFL. So, I basically would expect that to continue. I think what you're actually hoping for, if you're really jamming these game stacks, is you're hoping for some weird special teams thing to happen, for some fumble to happen, like literally exactly what just happened with the Seahawks on Sunday night, where Russ, the pass bounced off of Greg Olsen, or I don't remember if it was Olsen or Disley, but then there was the Patriots pick six. Like that's literally exactly what you're hoping for Seattle to kind of not be in desperation mode, but to be ready for, to be ready for a lot of passing attempts from Seattle.
How do you anticipate this game going, though? Of course, we're looking for that, but is this a contest where there's really never much risk of Ezekiel Elliott ever being phased out? But do you see this being a spot where Dallas defensively is just so weak they get gutted early and have to play from behind? Could we have a shootout situation here? It feels like no matter what, a lot of points are going to be scored, and it's a tough game to want to get away from. So are there any ways really to differentiate here within the game while still getting big pieces of it?
I mean, I think Zeke is the way to do it because they're just using him in the passing game a ton. He has 11 targets through 2 games, looking more like his 2018 usage instead of his 2019 usage. But then also, I mean, Dalton Schultz had 10 targets last week, and I know that they threw a bunch of passes, but that is like 10 targets from Dak in this game at literally 2% ownership. Maybe that is even high. I think is pretty interesting.
All right. You ended that sentence there like you were going to keep going. So I
have no good pivots for Seattle. I think Metcalf, Lockett, and Carson is like kind of a semi pivot. But the thing about Seattle is they're actually a really low volume offense. Like even these games where Russ throws 5 touchdowns, it's like he might complete 31 passes. So, if David Moore catches a touchdown, if Greg Olsen, if Will Disley, if these guys catch a touchdown, they're still probably not making optimal lineups or GBP winning lineups because it's probably 12 points instead of 18.
Yeah. And Alex, Russell Wilson's just been wildly efficient as a passer, right? He's attempted 28 and 35 passes, but on the year he's completed 82.5% of them. It's insane. He's thrown a touchdown on 14% of his passes through the first 2 weeks. So low volume for sure. I think we can expect him to continue being efficient. What are you doing with Dallas and Seattle, knowing that it's going to be, along with Arizona, Detroit, the most popular stack on the slate?
Yeah, I mean, I think both teams, it's going to be hard to fade the game because both passing offenses are very efficient. There's one narrative I've been hearing about Seattle that all of a sudden they've changed philosophy and they're a pass-first team. I just don't buy into that very much because it's usually when there's a narrative like that, it's because of some coaching change. Like Minnesota, they went to a really run-heavy team after they got a new head coach. Seattle, they still have the same head coach. So I'm how much different can we really expect it to be? So I think one contrarian pivot you could make in this game is you just play one of the running backs, Carson or Elliott, and it could be a one-off from the game. And you just hope that it's a lot more one-sided than people expect because the game fade is almost as in play in NFL as the game stack because this is so hard to predict which games will have the right game flow to really create a lot of fantasy production.
Yeah, and you know what? Last year they threw on 54% of their plays. This year it's 57%. So it's really not that much of a difference. So with Chris Carson, he's another guy that's in this same price range as Chubb and Sanders and Eckler and Connor and Jonathan Taylor. Can you see yourself getting to a decent amount of them this week, knowing that right now his ownership is coming in at 10%, just shy of 10%, sorry?
I don't love him as a play because he is losing some rushing attempts to Hyde, and Homer and Hyde are running some routes as well. So, I mean, he doesn't stand out as a great value this week, but I kind of like that leverage you can get over the game where everyone's playing the receivers in this game. So if you play the running backs and hope that the pendulum swings the other way and there's a lot of rushing attempts in the game, that could pay off.
Davis, the hype around Cam Newton is real. There's no denying that. And in our top stack tool at Awesemo, we've got New England essentially with the third highest ownership right now. Cam Newton, at least, with the third highest quarterback ownership. And then the Raiders are getting nothing across the board. Raiders going widely overlooked. And there was debate whether or not Josh Jacobs would be on the field or Darren Waller. But talk to me about this one, with one side being very popular, the other side with the Raiders coming off a phenomenal Monday night win against an aging Drew Brees and the New Orleans Saints. Is there anything we can do with this game to get different?
So I actually think that Cam Newton, you can run uncorrelated. I think that you can run him without a pass catcher. I think that you can run him without a Las Vegas Raiders bring back. And I think that you can do that until he re-injures his shoulder or that surgically repaired foot. Like I think that he has a chance to actually score more fantasy points than Dak, than Lamar, because when they get down in around, the 5-6 yard line, like there's no Sony Michel, there's no James White screen pass. It is bring in Ryan Izzo, bring in Dalton Kane, bring in the fullback, and we are going to run QB power, and we're going to run it 3 times, and then we'll maybe go for it again on 4th down. I mean, they were there, right, to win the game against Seattle, and there was not even a thought of like trying to trick them or do anything. It was just straight up, we're going to get Cam Newton another rushing touchdown, and we know like they've been, even with Cam Newton passing so well and so much, like they've still been a very run heavy team relative to league averages. Now, if you absolutely were like, I'm stacking in all my teams, I'm doing all the bringbacks. I actually love Darren Waller this week, 5,700 on DraftKings. He is a 38% target share of the Raiders offense. Like he leads the NFL in target share. Darren Waller does.
Not just at tight ends, but the entire league. Leads
the entire league. Now, This is what people will say to that. Obviously, Patriots good defense, but then also Bill Belichick, he locks up the opposing team's number one weapon. He does it. He's such a good coach. He knows how to do it. And like, of course, you can go through and find 100 examples of like, teams shredding him, right? Of like number one guys just, completely dunking on the Patriots. And I mean, football is so random, like stuff will just either happen or it won't. And sometimes there's no explanation for it. But Waller, with how much we would expect him to be part of the Raiders game plan, I think is like just a chef's kiss bring back with Cam Newton.
It kind of speaks, Alex, to what you had said, I don't know, a little while ago, that defense matters, but maybe the shadow matchups and the cornerback matchups aren't as important, or the wide receiver cornerback matchups aren't as important as we initially might assume. Another thing too is, linebacker core for New England is not what it was. They are relatively thin at the position. Darren Waller was seen, according to some reporters, stretching at Friday's practice. I don't know if he got a full practice in. He was dealing with that knee, so it's worth paying attention to. But do you find yourself getting to the New England Patriots and or the Las Vegas Raiders on the opposite side?
Yeah, I think the Patriots pass catchers seem to be very cheap across the industry. You got Demir Bird at $3K on DraftKings and $4,500 on FanDuel. That's the minimum price, and like that would be like appropriate if it was a guy that was playing maybe half of the snaps, but he's played 94% of the snaps, the most on the team at wide receiver. So he seems like an obvious value play that just hasn't like had a big game yet. N'Keal Harry as well. He's 4,200 and 5,300. So these guys are just really, really underpriced. As for stacking up Cam, I prefer to do it with one of these guys because it is so hard to nail wide receiver picks that just kind of locking in maybe upside performance by your quarterback and passing into your projected outcome for your lineup. I think that does help hit those wide receivers because picking 3 uncorrelated wide receivers is very difficult to hit. So I'm pretty excited about those guys. On the Las Vegas side, Waller, certainly a great play at tight end, really tough position to fill most of the time. So I think he's a good play. And Josh Jacobs could be the contrarian play where if Vegas gets up, he could have a big day.
Davis, let's have some fun now. Get into some stacks and some teams, some players. It can be individual. That's fine. That we really like at the end that are low owned. At the end of the show, of course, we're going to do our favorite pivots of the week, our top pivots, and our favorite low owned quote unquote contrarian plays. I talked a lot about Buffalo and the Rams throughout the week, and then low ownership on the Bengals side against the pretty heavily owned Eagles squad. What's a game that you really like that's going overlooked that really shouldn't be, that has that blow up potential, has the shootout potential, and has the weapons from a fantasy standpoint that can get the job done if it goes the way we like?
So I'm worried this game is kind of trending towards popular, but it is the Los Angeles Rams and the Buffalo Bills. This game is that game's in Buffalo, but the Rams really only throw to three guys. They throw to Woods, they throw to Kupp, and they throw to Higbee. And then the Bills really only throw it to two guys. They have, Gabriel Davis and Dawson Knox and those guys out there. But in terms
Knox
of
is even out this week, so we don't even have him.
Yeah. So he's in the concussion protocol. So yeah, I think that Diggs, Brown, Kupp, Woods, Higbee, and those two quarterbacks are, and then you throw Singletary in there as well. If you were just like, all right, I'm going to go enter in the $1 dive on FanDuel, I'm going to make 150 teams and I'm just going to stack. I'm going to use only those two quarterbacks and do, at least two of those players and all those stacks. Like I think that is like a super interesting, way to approach MME this week.
Yeah. And I think you're right about this game being trending in the opposite direction that we want it to be trending. But it's still one I really like. What about you, Alex? Any games right now that have you very excited going into the week that, maybe people just aren't paying attention to it?
Yeah, like that call of the Rams versus Buffalo. I got a few different spots that I'm kind of intrigued by. I think one that's really appealing is Carolina at the Chargers. You got McCaffrey out, you got Tyrod out. So what I'm looking at in this game is, first of all, like McCaffrey being out, you could play like Mike Davis. He's a good value this week. There's a lot of hype around Curtis Samuel getting more reps at rushing, so he makes a nice play. And you also got DJ Moore, who's just a high volume receiver. So all three of those guys give some upside to the Carolina side, and stacking up Bridgewater, he's always super, super cheap, so that could be a good play. And then on the Chargers side, going back to what you said, Laffy, I think maybe stacking up Eckler with the quarterback, Herbert, could be under the radar move. He, there's this narrative that Josh Kelly is kind of like taking a large part of Eckler's role. But I really see Eckler as a guy they're trying to limit to 20 touches. He got exactly 20 touches last game. Kelly got like 25, but they ran the ball like 40 times. So I'm thinking a game where the Chargers don't have such an insane amount of rushing attempts, Eckler will get the larger share of the workload, and he's kind of buy low for me.
All right. Let's stick with you for a second, Alex. I'll ask you about the Jets and Indianapolis Colts only because you mentioned it earlier today. I'm gonna have to. I can't ride this train with you. I can't do it. I just can't get there. Here's my thing. I don't know who the Jets have. Like Crowder's out, Perriman's out, Chris Hogan. I don't know. Maybe he plays. Maybe he doesn't. Braxton Berrios, Chris Herndon. Le'Veon Bell's on the IR. Frank Gore got 21 carries last game. You tell me, because you're the guy that's won more money than anybody playing DFS. What is it about the Jets that stands out and gives you a reasonable level of hope that maybe they can be used as a run back or a stack against the Colts as 11.5-point dogs?
Yeah, I think that it's just kind of like they got to put some guys out in the field, and they're cheap. So, the injuries to Crowder and Perryman, the receivers now are Berrios, Hogan, and Josh Malone. None of these guys have been like doing much in fantasy like in their careers, but one thing that's drawing me to Berrios in particular is he played 0% of snaps week 1, played 86% week 2, and got 8 targets. I could see that he has a lot of potential because they just don't have any high volume targets. Chris Herndon as well at tight end. He makes a lot of sense. So it's not really a question of like are these guys talented? Like we all know it's not a good spot, but they could get lucky, and I'm willing to take some shots on that.
Okay. I'm pretty fascinated by this Atlanta and Chicago game, Alex or Davis. regardless of what Julio Jones' status is, and obviously it's going to play a significant role, but just looking at it now, you're talking about two teams, one in Atlanta whose defense is terrible, and they're ravaged even more. They just lost Ricardo Allen. Who's the other one that's not going to be back yet? I can't remember. I think he's a safety. Forget his name. He hasn't played all season, but he was a starter. They could be down another linebacker this week. They just keep falling apart. And now you've got Mitch Trubisky walking into a matchup that actually might continue to make him look decent. While on the other side, the only thing giving Atlanta shots every week is Matt Ryan in this passing game. What about this game between the Falcons and Bears?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because Trubisky, I believe that Trubisky is number one all time in times being in the Millionaire Maker winners lineup. I believe that he has won someone $1 million 3 different times. And I think
real?
that is, yeah, I mean, I know that he has been in it 3 times. I don't know if that is the most though. Like, I mean, I assume that like, Lamar or Dak or someone maybe has done it more often, but the reason why he does it is he's always cheap. No one ever plays him because everyone thinks he sucks, and he has like such obvious stacks, right? It's Allen Robinson, and right now it is actually Jimmy Graham, which is disgusting. But Jimmy Graham, $3,400 on DraftKings, had 7 targets in week 1, and then they were winning for most of last week, so they didn't have to target him as much there. But they're playing loads of 12 personnel and not playing Anthony Miller very much, so that definitely is feeding into the Jimmy Graham stuff. But yeah, I mean, Allen Robinson, Mitch Trubisky, bring it back with Calvin Ridley. Like that is, and like that sounds like, oh, you're like Allen Robinson, he'll be chalk. Calvin Ridley, he'll be chalk. But like they really actually won't be, because the field can't play all the dudes. Like the field can't own Metcalf and Lockett at like a 35% clip and then also play Allen Robinson and Calvin. Like it's just, when you start thinking about how the salary constrains the field, it's just not possible.
Absolutely. And right now we got Robinson weighing in around 12.9 or 12.9%. That's really low given the matchup. I mean, Davis, let me put it this way, and then I'll go to you, Alex. If Allen Robinson, if this ownership closes at under 13 or around 13%, does he become one of your favorite tournament wide receivers this week? Davis?
Yeah, I think that he would be one of my favorites. I need to bring up though, like I'm just looking at my projections right now and updating them. In terms of pivots, I think that Christian Kirk being out actually does just give us like the most elite pivot ever, which is Andy Isabella at 3,800. Like he is like the least public play ever. And if he gets there, like if he catches 4 passes in this game, he's getting there because he's only getting targeted like 30 yards down the field. Like, and he will not be owned, even with everyone and their mom playing Kyler Murray. People are not going to play Isabella.
So, all right. So you've gone to him twice now. This is the tape.
I just ran our projections. Like I just went back into my stuff and moved Kirk out, and Isabella's like, it's like I have neon lights dancing around telling me to play him.
2 targets, 71 air yards this season. So yeah, there's definitely something to be said for that. Alex, let me go back to Atlanta and Chicago for a moment. We can close the show with more Andy Isabella talk. But is there concern that Anthony Miller's snap counts have been just really low? Because to me, it is a little bit concerning. I think there's still going to be opportunity. He might find himself getting a red zone look or 2. He's had 1 red zone opportunity in each game. But as far as snap counts go, he's played fewer snaps on the year than Darnell Mooney and only 1 more than Javon Wims. So it doesn't seem like he's actually starter caliber wide receiver right now. It's a little bit concerning to me. What are you doing with the Bears and the Falcons?
Yeah, I mean, Anthony Miller, I agree, is just too concerning in the snap counts. 55% of routes on week 1, 52% week 2. So it's not even like there was 1 week where he was out there more. And when you have Trubisky throwing to him, like that's not even a great quarterback. So like I think Miller is definitely a fade. I agree with Davis that maybe going to Graham as your second target in Chicago makes sense. I do like the game though. I think that it has potential if Chicago can have a day where they overperform. because Atlanta's defense really isn't that great, particularly versus pass. So I think there's upside there. And I kind of want to buy low on Julio Jones. He's basically been the third receiver this year so far for the Falcons.
Fourth last week.
Yeah, I mean, he has 16 targets in 2 weeks. He's been targeted 18% of the time. That's a lot lower than Calvin Ridley. He's been targeted 24% and engaged 24% as well. So I think that the targets there's a lot of variance there, and it varies a lot from week to week. I mean, you could have a guy that's projected for 6 targets, get 10 targets in 2 straight weeks. And then if you're just going off week 1 and week 2, you're not accounting for all that noise. So I'm kind of leaning on last year's sample where Julio was clear number 1. I think it's somewhere in between last year and this year. So that's kind of making me think he might not be a 100-yard a game guy anymore. But if he can get 80 yards a game and he's 7,400, that's an interesting spot.
All right, and I'll just throw it out there one more time. David Montgomery's the bell cow back here. Tariq Cohen will have a game here and there where he's going to put in a decent effort, but it appears that they're going to David Montgomery as often as they possibly can. Hey, Davis, are you buying into Russell Gage?
No, man, I'm not. I think that if Julio Jones is active and on the team, he's not going to have an 18% target share. It's got maybe Gage has earned his way into 18% target share and it's 24% Julio, 26% Ridley or something like that. But I can't get on board with Russell Gage being scoring 14 fantasy points a game. I just can't.
It's tough to get to, man. What about Cincinnati? AJ Green leads the league in air yards. Matt Gajewski, who was on a show with me earlier, mentioned that somebody on Twitter was calling them prayer yards, which is actually really good. But according to Pro Football Focus, none of his 8 deep passes, which also leads the league, have been catchable. But Burrow just keeps going back to him, even in dire straits towards the end of that game, down by 2 scores against Cleveland. He kept going his way. And then Tyler Boyd had a bit of a bounce back game. Joe Mixon continues to struggle behind that bad run blocking. And Joe Mixon threw over 60 times in week 2. How about this spot, Davis, against Philadelphia, where they're getting 4.5 points on the road, but Philly's defense hasn't shown a whole lot that much either. Is Cincinnati primed for a decent spot at low ownership, or should we be looking elsewhere?
I mean, I like playing the Cincinnati guys because they just completely abandon the ground game when they go down. Zach Taylor seems to be pretty smart about that. He's not trying to run Joe Mixon on first down 2 touchdowns. He's look, either Burrow can make these throws or he can't, but we're going to lose either way. So I'd rather let Burrow throw. I guess the one thing I'm concerned about is they watch the film from that Browns game and they're like, oh my God, we are going to get Joe Burrow killed as a rookie and he's never going to come back. I believe the stat from PFF last week was he was hit on 40% of his dropbacks, that he was under pressure or hit that many times. And it's he's going to get hurt. You're not going to have a franchise quarterback if he's getting that demolished. So maybe they go a little bit more conservative, but I actually think Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins, I'll not publicly say anything kind about a 32-year-old NFL wide receiver. You're not gonna get me on the record going that direction. I actually don't hate Boyd, Burrow, and Sample this week. And I don't know if T. Higgins is minimum salary. If he is, I would maybe throw that dart. He's not, so never mind.
I will say something nice about a 32-year-old wide receiver. It's not over yet. The lights are still on. They're dim, but they're still on. It's AJ Green week, baby. Look, I'm not too worried about Darius Slay. I will say this much, though, on the record. If AJ Green fails to come through this week, I'll hang it up, I'll take the loss, and I'll move on. Feel free to berate me on Twitter. But you have to be following me at Loughy_D. It's LOUGHY_D. And, of course, follow Alex at Awesemo DFS and Davis at Davis Mattek. It's Mattek. All right, let's hit on one more spot here, then we'll get to our top pivots, our top fades, and our top pivots for week 3. Alex, any other spots that you think the viewers need to hear about? Like I said, we're not doing 13 games. It'll take hours. But I want to get to all the really important stuff and good spots to get away from and really start beginning to build your lineups out and set up everything in Cruncher. What would be another good spot to look for here if we're trying to be a little bit different?
I think Denver versus Tampa Bay, with Drew Lock out, he's being replaced by Jeff Driscoll. And Drew Lock has been pretty mediocre, so that shouldn't be a huge change. Driscoll adds a lot on the ground, so I think he has some value at quarterback. And then you got Cortland Sutton out for the year. I'm actually more interested in the Tampa Bay side. So I'm thinking if I stack up Brady Evans or Brady Godwin, there's this narrative that Brady is just done, but I think these guys offer enough upside individually that you can make it work. And then the only question is, can Denver keep it competitive? So Tampa has to keep passing. So I'm thinking maybe KJ Hamler is a guy that could be a target on Denver. He's the min price. He has been getting hyped up a lot. He's a rookie. Played 70% of snaps in week 2 after playing 0 in week 1 due to injuries. So I think that his playing time could surprise people. And I think that as far as a value guy, he's kind of interesting.
Yeah, glad you mentioned that, Alex, because someone just in chat a moment ago said, I don't know if they've talked about KJ. This is Mark Smith saying this in our super chat. I don't know if they talked about KJ Hamler on the show yet, but every tout show and podcast has talked about him all week. At what point is he no longer a sleeper? What about you, Davis? Do you think he does start gaining ownership? Have you heard a lot of hype surrounding him throughout the week?
I think the thing is Hamler's a guy that people on tout shows will be like, oh yeah, KJ Hamler, 7 targets last week, stepping into this role. And then the people go to open up their optimizer, their projection of choice, and they're like, oh, he's projected for 6.5 points. I'm probably not going to play that guy. So and also, if you're the sort of person who just does it by hand and builds single entry and 3 max teams, it's just not a guy that feels comfortable to click on at all. In a weird way, I actually think if people were going to play him, they would be playing him in cash games to jam DeAndre Hopkins and Ezekiel Elliott and all the really high price plays into there. But no, I don't think Hamler will be, owned or chalk or anything like that at all. Because again, it's just there's a difference between talking about a slate and actually getting down to running lineups.
Yeah, it is so funny how throughout the week you'll talk a great game about a player and then realize you're getting 0%, even when you manually adjust him up 2 fantasy points. So it's a good point. And that might be the case. I don't know. By the way, just coming in now from Ian Rappaport or Schefter. I don't know. They're all the same at this point. Christian Kirk has officially been ruled out. It was Adam Schefter. Officially been ruled out. So no Christian Kirk. Davis, I told you I'd get to it one more time at the end of the show. Andy Isabella, lock and load. I can't even say jam him in because he's dirt cheap. This isn't like a $10,000 Christian McCaffrey. This is Andy Isabella coming in bottom of the barrel on DraftKings at 3,800. Here's your final opportunity to convince everyone. And I know you don't care to convince them, but I'm going to ask you to, that Andy Isabella with Christian Kirk officially ruled out is the guy to get cheap with in week 3.
So, obviously it's a great matchup, right? Everyone's playing Kirk. Everyone acknowledges that he is the highest projected quarterback, or everyone's playing Kyler, right? And thinks he's the highest projected quarterback of the week. And Hopkins only saw a 23% market share last week instead of the 42% he saw in week 1. And I love rostering guys like Isabella where it just doesn't take them that many plays to get there. He had a 54-yard reception last week on a deep ball that if Kyler actually had just gotten maybe 2 more yards on it, he would have just walked in for an 80-yard touchdown, scored the 88-yard touchdown against the 49ers last year. That's his game. His game is not going to be 8 catches for 64 yards. It's going to be it literally is going to be he's actually going to get you 0 points, or he's going to get you a lot of points because they're going to be feeding him these highly volatile down the field targets. So I feel pretty irrationally confident in it. He's a guy I'm going through my season long leagues and putting him into starting lineups everywhere right now.
Yeah, playing him over a quarterback in a super flex league. I get it. But no, it's better than Larry Fitzgerald giving you 5 for 32 or something like that, which is very likely the case. All right, hey, hit that thumbs up if you came in late. If you're in the mobile app and you don't see it, just click out of chat and you can pop that thumbs up. It helps us greatly. combating that YouTube algorithm around here, man. They don't like the little guys. So we're just trying to keep our heads above water, keep putting free content out here on the site. It makes it much easier when we have that support from you as well. Subscribe, hit the notification bell as well. And if you didn't hear, well, I don't know where you've been, but our express package over at Awesemo, the one that's only $3.95 a week, not $395, $3.95 a week, now includes all NFL Showdown content. The ownership projections, the player projections, the top plays, the rankings, everything for NFL Showdown is now included in the express package for $3.95 a week. Look, that alone, not even including what it's on top of, the other content that's in the weekly express pass, is worth it alone on its face right there. Go to awesemo.com/join, check it out. You can see Jordan Klein's putting it up on the screen right now as well. We have the lineup builder for the all access pass with the ownership projections, player projections, the top stack tools for football, baseball, you name it, everything, the Fantasy Cruncher add-on. And of course, all of these tools developed, used, and given to us by the #1 ranked DFS player in the world. You've heard me say it once, I'll say it again. We don't just slap his name on it. It's the real deal. These are his ownership projections. These are his real projections that are up on the site that you get when you become a member here at awesemo.com. And when you do sign up, of course, at awesemo.com/join, go to our premium Slack chat, sign up, and join the family, join the community, talking DFS and sports all year round. Awesemo.com/join. Matter of fact, Davis, I remember when we first started we were on Skype before any of this, and I feel like we were ahead of the Slack curve when it first happened many moons ago.
Oh, I mean, everyone knows David Kitchen loves his web gadgets, and like Kitchen was an early adopter of Slack. Now, he was also an early adopter of Bandcamp and Trello and Asana and every other kind of organizational app you could ever possibly find. But Slack was a good find by Mr. Kitchen.
It was, and you'll like it here for sure. All right, Alex, we'll kick it off with you. We're going to do our top fades of the week, and then we're going to do our pivots of the week. Let's go, instead of going by position, let's do it this way. So fades of the week, give me 3. And let me preface this by saying fade doesn't mean you're coming in with necessarily with 0% of a guy. It might simply mean that you're coming in well below the field, not above the field. So mind that, keep that in mind when we discuss this. Go ahead, Alex. Give me 3 fades for this week.
Man, I feel like I got to take a victory lap here because last week my fade of the week was Davante Adams. Everyone's like, you're crazy. But that's just how football works. Is sometimes these like high-owned guys, like they just don't really deliver. So I guess one fade of the week right off the bat here. I think Tyler Lockett is way over-owned based on our ownership projections. He's projected to be 25% owned. Now, the thing about Tyler Lockett is he's always been elite at efficiency, but he's never been targeted at an elite rate. And I'm pulling up the numbers for this. Last year, he was targeted about 21% of the time, 20.5% last year, and this year the same. So that adds up to a guy that is a good receiver, but not like a #1 guy like a Hopkins or Davante Adams. So I think given that he's projected to be the second highest owned wide receiver on the slate, I'm happy enough being under the field on Tyler Lockett.
All right. Davis, who do you have?
So I am always very hesitant to outright fade guys who I know are going to be, mega popular.
And that's why I preface it with, it's not, you're saying 0% necessarily.
So the guy who I could see garnering a good bit of ownership that I'm just not super interested in personally is James Conner. Alex mentioned him a little bit earlier in the show. And it's not that I think he's a terrible player that he can't get there. I just think Miles Sanders is better. I think Devin Singletary is a better play for the price. I think Derrick Henry is a better play if you're looking for the contrarian low owned guy. If you tell me one of those guys has 3 touchdowns, it's Derrick Henry every day, and it's not James Conner. I think Henry's so much more likely to break the slate. So I know that Connor's only kind of middling chalk, but that's the answer of the guy who I've heard other people talk about who I'm really just not that interested in.
All right. For me, I'm going to go with Amari Cooper. I'll keep this trend going from last week. And, if you faded Amari Cooper last week, it definitely didn't kill you. He had 19 DraftKings points. That's fine. It's not bad. It's not great. But he also has a propensity to disappear, right? I know I'm a broken record with this, but if he's going to keep coming in at 20+% ownership each week, I have no problem making pivots away from him at a position that is ungodly deep. For example, if Allen Robinson is half the ownership of Amari Cooper, very easy decision for me. If Kenny Golladay is half the ownership of Cooper, it's also a pretty easy decision. I still had a decent amount of Cooper last week, but less than the field, and I anticipate that being the same again today. All right, Davis. I was saying we do 3 fades of the week, but instead of that, let's just flip it over to our top pivots. And if you have more than one, that's great. If you also have any value options you like, feel free to toss them out there as well. Your pivot of the week as we close out this week 3 edition of On the Contrary is
Michael Gallup. He will be the lowest owned wide receiver of the 5 guys in that game of Cooper, Lamb, Gallup, Metcalf, and Lockett. He on both sides. I would expect that he is going to be the lowest owned. And what's interesting about him is for tournaments, he actually has the role you want. He's got an average depth of target of 17.5 yards down the field. They're really only he's just running wind sprints out there, but getting 5 to 6 targets a game deep down the field. And for tournaments, that's the exact type of volatility that you want to be embracing. So Gallup is going to be my top pivot of the week.
All right, Michael Gallup, and my fade here is Amari Cooper. So there's a little bit of alignment there. How about you, Alex?
Oh man, this is so tough. I guess my general inclination is to play the running back on a pass-heavy game. So I think my pivots would be Ezekiel Elliott or Chris Carson in this Dallas-Seattle game. Just hope that one of the 2 teams gets a big lead and dominates the time of possession. So that's the logic there. And I don't think either one is going to be super contrarian, but you're going to be dodging a lot of high-owned players on the receiving and quarterback side.
Okay. I'll give you kind of a twofold answer where it's just look towards some of these 6K running backs. This isn't to say you need to load up on all of them, but I do think this is a week where getting a good amount of exposure to some of them and spreading it out a little bit can make a lot of sense. I think we'll see some updates, of course, but Nick Chubb's coming in at sub 1% in a game where they should have a pretty firm command of the lead in this one. David Montgomery, I mentioned, sub 1%. The list goes on. There's just a lot of these guys that are very, very low owned right now that have that 20+ touch upside with relative ease. So take a look at them. Before we go, as a matter of fact, Davis, I did want to ask you guys about the whole injury situation and some of these running backs that aren't really getting discussed. You would have thought there'd be a lot more value, right, on this slate because you had Christian McCaffrey go down, you had Barkley go down, you had, Raheem Mostert and Tevin Coleman go down in San Francisco. Is there any real value that we are getting, any opportunities out of these backfields, or are they widely going to be fade situations?
I think they are going to be mostly faded by the public. It makes Mike Davis really interesting, right? He had 8 targets and 8 receptions last week. They have the tough matchup against the Chargers, but we're talking about, literally he plays in the same offense that makes Christian McCaffrey average, 27 fantasy points a game. Now, probably they're going to have 3 running backs active, Bonifant, Trenton Cannon as well. But there is at least some chance that they're just all right, Mike Davis, you're playing 70% of the snaps and we're not changing our offense that much in just 1 week from what it was like with McCaffrey. I would say maybe all of that coalescing into him being a smash DFS play is 5% likelihood or something like that, but it certainly is going to be less than he is going to be owned. He will just be completely forgotten about. And then the other situation is Darius Slayton for the New York Giants. We have this super banged up 49ers team. Sterling Shepard is out. Saquon Barkley is out. They are home underdogs. Darius Slayton already has a 2-touchdown, 100+ yard game against the Steelers, who are probably the best defense in the NFL right now. Slayton to me seems like a guy who is going to be 4% owned on FanDuel or something like that and has legit, 35-point style upside.
Yeah, it just doesn't seem like any of these guys are garnering a ton of ownership. The one right now coming in at double digits, James Conner, Jeff Wilson, $4,000, 10%. with no Tevin Coleman, no Raheem Mostert. Jerick McKinnon, someone, as a matter of fact, Davis loved coming in. He was a Sparks guy. I know, just every single year he broke your heart. But McKinnon getting nothing. Jeff Wilson seems to be getting a lot at 10%. Do we get there or do we leave it alone, Alex?
Yeah, I hated to see that ownership because after this injury to Tevin Coleman and Raheem Mostert, everyone was like, Jerick McKinnon's the next guy up. And I'm like, he's not going to be a workhorse. He's like that receiving back. But it seems like everyone's jumped on Jeff Wilson instead. I think that's the right move. I think Jeff Wilson will, if they have a lot of rushing attempts in this game, then he'll get a lot of them. So I think that he makes a nice play. McKinnon's not crazy as a tournament dart because it seems like he's super low owned in our ownership projections, which is kind of surprising to me, but he's not off my radar.
Coming up just in a little bit, Ben Rasa, Julian Edlow with the betting show. If you haven't gone to oddsshopper.awesemo.com yet, if you haven't listened to me when I told you to go there because it's free and all of the books that we have on there that you can shop odds with, which you need to do to be a profitable bettor in this day and age, all of them have massive, massive promotions for you to sign up, like $500 free bets and wild shit that you need to be taking advantage of. Oddsshopper.awesemo.com. It's awesome. You can search the player name and all of their props come up. You got a bet tracker in there to track all your bets, a watch list so you can get alerts whenever a bet moves or a line moves in the direction you're looking for. And just to simply use it for DFS research, for fantasy research, it's an awesome tool to have. It's entirely free, and I would definitely recommend checking it out. Stick around for Ben and Julian and the betting show. Josh Engelman, Adam Scher got NBA Live Before Lock tonight. Jason and Terry got MLB Live Before Lock. So we've got a ton coming up right here on the Awesemo channel and a little bit of free content as well at awesemo.com. If you aren't a premium sub and you're not ready to sign up quite yet, you can head over there and check out our free NFL projections today and MLB ownership projections. Let us know what you think. That'll do it for us. Hit that thumbs up on your way out. Follow Davis Mattek on Twitter at Davis Mattek. Check out the Takecast, the Swellcast, and all of his work at Daily Roto and Sports Grid. You know where to find Alex and myself at Awesemo DFS, at Lafayette_D. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here next time on The Contrary.